Good evening, everybody. My name is Deborah Norville, and I am delighted to welcome you to the 7th Double Helix Gold Medal Dinner. Please take your seats, if you could. This is such an exciting time for us to be gathering in this very full and very busy and very happy room. I stand here tonight and I look at this room and I look at the beautiful people and I look at the happy smiling faces and I'm thinking of words like awe and pride and promise and hope. And I think each of us in one way or another can identify with one of those four words. Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory is an unbelievable place. It is really kind of a magical place where incredible medical and scientific breakthroughs happen, oftentimes when you least expect it. But what we do know, it happens on a very regular basis. As many of us in this room who are Long Islanders, we look with pride over to the Bay and the scientific work that goes on there at the Cold Spring Harbor Labs. I know I stand in awe, and Carl and I have often talked, my husband and I have often talked about just how proud we are to live in a part of the world where our neighbors, our friends, people we pass by at the grocery store are engaged in such important work or are supporting that important work. The work that the lab does, research in autism and diseases of the brain and cancer. And I suspect I, like many of you here, have been affected by one of the many disorders that are the focus of research that's done at the labs. Maybe you or a family member or a friend have been touched by neurological disease or cancer. And it's so cool to know that these unbelievable minds over at the lab are working to fight those diseases and to come up with the cures and to come up with the treatments. And tonight, that's what we celebrate. So we are proud, we are in awe, and we are filled with great hope because we know the work that's being done at the labs is bearing fruit that has real promise right now for all of us. Each of us here is here because of the research that's being done at Cold Spring Harbor Labs, and we know it's going to result in better diagnostics, we know it's going to result in better treatments, we know it's going to result, God willing, in cures for those who suffer from some sort of genetic disease. And it's a real source of pride to know that the laboratory is the birthplace of molecular biology. That's so cool. I remember when I met Jim Watson, and he's the most humble guy in the whole wide world, or at least he was at that particular moment. And I didn't hear his name, and we were making small talk, and he asked me what I did, and I told him, and I said, "And what do you do?" And Dr. Watson said, quote, "I run a small laboratory in Long Island." Who knew he ran Cold Spring Harbor Labs? And then I was just absolutely mortified when I got to my place later after the cocktail and realized the place card next to me said Dr. Watson, and that charming gentleman who ran that little bitty lab was the guy next to me. Went, "I may be blonde, but I'm not as stupid as I know you think I am." And we became fast friends then and there. He said, "I knew it was just my sparkling good looks and charming personality that was attracting you." And it was, Jim. It is also, though, incredible to know what goes on at the lab is making such a difference in improving diagnostics and developing new and effective drugs for so many cancers and for autism and for Alzheimer's and for Parkinson's disease and for depression and for schizophrenia and for so many other genetically related diseases. There is no place else in the world where so much promise can be found in one place. Because we know that the only real answer to dealing with the challenges that we face is through research and understanding the genetics that cause disease, and that's what goes on at the lab. It's also pretty awe-inspiring and a source of great pride to know that the lab is the home of 8 Nobel Prize winners, that it has a track record of recruiting the absolute top scientists in the world, and that they are developing the latest and most innovative technologies and instituting collaborations that you're going to be learning more about that are really resulting in unbelievable promise. If you ever go over to the lab, go over, try to understand what's going on, go over for a concert that you might hear, and what you'll hear, shh, going on at the side, are these unbelievable discussions, just as I heard in the elevator coming up tonight, where two scientists were discussing, I hope Dr. So-and-so is there, because I really want you to meet him, because I think he's working on something that's really going to have applications to what you're doing. That's what goes on all the time at the labs, and it is so exciting, and that's why there's so much good stuff happening there. Every year, more than 12,000 scientists come there to meet and participate in meetings and technological conferences, and I think, for me, working in television, working in an industry where every day we get those horrible things called ratings, and most days they're pretty good, and some days they're not, and those are those days we tell ourselves that the TV show is halfway to Pluto and we'll make it better tomorrow. But ratings matter, and measurements are important. And Cold Spring Harbor is consistently ranked #1 in the world in genetics and molecular biology. There is no one better than you. And because I firmly believe there is no better way to get a message across than the magic of television, take a look at your video screens and take a look inside Cold Spring Harbor Labs, where you will see that science never, ever sleeps.
So I arrived at Cold Spring Harbor in the spring of 1979 to do a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship. And I brought the science that I was working on in Australia to Cold Spring Harbor because it was a great research environment for young people. And I didn't anticipate that I'd still be here 33 years later. When I was first working here, one of the things that struck me was that it was an extremely interactive place. And I think that's still true today.
There's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of really smart people. If you're looking for a collaborator, you're likely to be able to find somebody in the next building.
It's an exciting place where people help each other instead of weed each other out.
The mix of scientists from different disciplines in a very small community where everyone knows each other creates a certain magic.
Taking risks and trying innovative approaches is expected, and that is going to be considered as part of your job. And that means you're not here to turn a crank, you're here to have some big ideas and pursue them. Even if they fail, it's better that you went after them.
Our research focuses on acute myeloid leukemia, and there's been enormous progress in sort of understanding this disease and what causes it. Our basic strategy is we're trying to find new cancer targets. And so the idea is that we find what the cancers need and then we try to go after it with therapies. It's very much centered on these therapeutic development and cancer questions.
Chris found 5 completely new therapeutic targets. For one of them, there was an existing drug for a completely different reason. It is now under development and will go into the clinic to treat chemotherapy-resistant acute myeloid leukemia in patients next year. And I'm very optimistic that this will become a contributor to the treatment of what was an incurable leukemia.
A lot of the research on autism has focused more on the social aspect, but I think that understanding what's happening on the sensory side is really important. And the way that we process sensory information determines a lot of who we are and how we interact with the world and the kinds of decisions that we make. And by understanding more about how we put together pieces of sensory information, I think it might give us real insight into what's going on in autism spectrum disorder.
Mike Wigler's laboratory has literally changed the way we think about autism because they found that a very high number of autistic children have spontaneous copy number variations in their genome. That research has coupled with our research on cognitive neuroscience by the newly arrived Anne Churchland, and I think the marrying of what Anne does is going to be a very powerful linking between genetics and neuroscience.
My daughter has spinal muscular atrophy, and the reason to get involved with Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, I think, has been really twofold. We care deeply about the work Dr. Krinner is doing, and so helping him is helping our daughter. More generally, it seems to me that places where great work is being done ought to be helped. If we can take the work and magnify it and increase it, the impact on people's health and science is going to be tremendous. Spending money is one thing. Spending money in a way that really produces results and creates great science, I think, is another. And I think at Cold Spring, that's really what we see going on.
Our ability to go out and raise funds from donors of the laboratory and to support these young scientists, such as Chris Vakish and Ann Churchland, and even our senior scientists, such as Adrian Craner, enable our scientists to move into areas which would be otherwise difficult to do.
There's really no other place that I know of that has this combination of fantastic scientists on the campus, but also this convening ability to bring other groups here for some of the best meetings that occur anywhere in the world.
I would call Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory a learning hub or a sort of a congregation point for essentially every scientist in the cancer research field, certainly, and even more broadly.
Cold Spring Harbor has sort of placed themselves in the center of both great science and great education.
For the past 120 years, Cold Spring Harbor has been a leading genetics research center in the United States and in fact throughout the world. And one of the things that I think in the future I'll look back at the time I've been at Cold Spring Harbor and say that Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory has exploited its powerful genetic technologies to understanding disease. I expect that we will have a big impact on cancer therapies. We have already and will continue to have a big impact on understanding neurological disorders, particularly cognitive disorders such as autism and schizophrenia and depression.
I want the lab to, change the world for the better. Not in a marginal way, but in a sort of way that, people can drive by us and say, they cured cancer.
I think it's exciting times. I think Cold Spring Harbor is exactly in the right position right now, and I hope in the future I'll look back and say, well, in a small way I contributed to it.
The Labs is a magical place, and it's a kind of place where I'm sure every day people stand around in hallways and cafeterias and in laboratories and say, what are the chances? Well, what are the chances that you could find in the body of one person an absolute cutting-edge scientist, and yet at the same time someone who is a rock star manager and leader? Well, that's what Cold Spring Harbor Labs has found in that man who thought he was just coming for a couple of years to do a little scientific research, and 33 years later is still there. The president of Cold Spring Harbor Labs, Bruce Stillman, is truly a rock star. And before we get Bruce up here, I just want to brag a little bit on you as you walk. Bruce is the winner of both the Sloan and the Horwitz Prizes. He has had an accomplished career studying DNA replication and looking how that process goes awry in the formation of cancers. He has been at the forefront of cancer genetics. And in addition to everything he does at the labs, he serves as an advisor to the National Cancer Institute, to Princeton, to MIT, to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and he plays a leadership role in regional and state initiatives that are working to build the bioeconomy and keep our nation competitive in this very important field. In just the last decade, this scientist president, all in the body of this one amazing man, has doubled the size of Cold Spring Harbor and expanded its research capacity by 40%. He is now launching a bold cancer therapeutics initiative which will accelerate the development of more therapeutic and also less toxic cancer treatments, which is unbelievable. And what is truly fabulous for those of us in this room who are not scientists, he can explain it in a way that we can understand. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you the president of Cold Spring Harbor Labs, Dr. Bruce Stillman.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for very eloquently introducing Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory to our guests, or really I should say to our collaborators. I also want to thank my friend Phil Donahue, who's here, who hosted, emceed the first 5 Double Helix Medals dinners, and thank you, Phil, for your support of Cold Spring Harbor. In the film that you just watched, you heard words like collaboration or interaction, and most importantly, support. This is a time in science where no breakthrough is made alone. And tonight, each and every one of you joins with us in helping to make breakthroughs possible. I'm pleased to welcome back many of our friends who we know so well and acknowledge the people who co-chaired this event, particularly Bob and Terry Lindsay, Elizabeth and Lee Ainsley, Lara and Reme Trefle, Freddie and Erwin Stahler, Herb Boyer, Richard Scheller, and Mark and Jennifer Lipschutz. Thank you for your generosity. And thank you for bringing new friends to this event. I also want to thank the chair of our board, Jamie Nichols, for all that she has done and the trustees do to support Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. We have a board that really understands and gets Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory and its vital role in driving scientific breakthroughs, and I want to thank them. And Jamie, please stand on behalf of the Board of Trustees. As we have in the past, tonight we honour 3 individuals who have contributed to biomedical research and the advancement of better medicines. Michael J. Fox, you have pioneered a foundation that has supported really innovative research, disease-specific research, and incorporated cutting-edge advances into the clinic. In doing so, you have created a model for foundations that is now used around the world. Art Levinson. Genentech is well known for its scientific excellence. You headed the company through its most productive and groundbreaking era, fostering unprecedented new drugs and development and innovation. And Mary Lindsay. Your support of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory as a trustee, an advisor, and indeed a great friend exemplifies how philanthropic support can really make a huge difference in an organization. So we are really very, very pleased to honor these 3 outstanding individuals. As Deborah indicated, for most of our 123-year history, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory's core expertise has been genetics and molecular biology. And ladies and gentlemen, there is no better time in the history of science than to be a leader in this field right now. You heard in the film from Charles Sawyers that we have big ideas at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. These big ideas lead to big discoveries. And these big discoveries help in the fight against diseases such as cancer or disorders of the brain. As the cost of DNA sequencing drops from about $1 million that it was about 5 years ago to what is projected in the near future to be only a few $100s, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory is at the forefront of developing and using sequencing to map the genetic fingerprints of cancer and of neurological diseases. Just one example, our scientists have developed a patented technology that allows us to turn on and off at will every gene in cells in the body. And imagine a switchboard where you can literally turn off a gene for a disease protein, but in fact leave all of the other cells in the body intact without having an effect. This is exactly the process that was used to develop the drug for this acute myeloid leukemia that you heard about in the video. And it's precisely why we cannot stop now to continue to develop new therapeutics for other diseases. At Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, we invest about $150 million every year in research and science education. Not so long ago, when I took over running the laboratory, about 70% of our research funds came from grants that our scientists wrote. Nowadays, with NIH funding regrettably being in decline, We have grown, and private philanthropy funds have increased to support over 60% of our research. And it may go higher if our nation's fiscal problems continue. Our ability to attract philanthropic support is one of the great strengths of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. And I've seen this as a young scientist in coming to Cold Spring Harbor, because we were able to do what we wanted to do. And that fosters a lot of outstanding pioneering research, which leads to medical breakthroughs. The key to unlocking these new treatments and cures for cancer and neurological diseases is a deep expertise in genetics and molecular biology. And we are rated #1 by Thomson Reuters in the world in this particular field. That is why we have over 30 clinical collaborations with outstanding centers around the world. We also have 2 of the largest companies in the United States, Pfizer and DuPont, who just in the last year we have signed multi-year agreements to develop technologies, and they are using our technologies to develop research in their organizations. And this is why over 12,000 scientists a year come to Cold Spring Harbor from over 50 countries to attend our conferences and to take our scientific courses where they learn about how to do science. And most important, this is why we've been able to develop targeted drugs that have advanced into clinical trials for spinal muscular atrophy and for leukemia, and soon for other diseases. These breakthroughs began at Cold Spring Harbor and are perfect examples of why private funding, like your support tonight, is so important for our research. So I want to leave you tonight with being assured that your collaboration and support of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory could not be more impactful, and it couldn't be more timely, because we are the institution where breakthroughs begin. Thank you very much.
It's so wonderful to know that there is somewhere that you can give your money and know that the money that you give is being well spent and bringing results right now. Bruce, thank you for your leadership. We are so grateful for your guidance of the labs and what you do there. I think, as everybody in this room knows, next week in Stockholm is a pretty big time. The Nobel Foundation will be commemorating a fairly important anniversary. And it's very rare that they have the opportunity to commemorate 50 years after a medal was first awarded, because most people who receive Nobel Prizes are a little up in years. But 50 years ago, that was not the case. A rather young man was among those who was awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the double helix structure of DNA. That, of course, James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins. One of those men is still with us. That breakthrough was, as we all know, the beginning of contemporary biology, launching the biomedical revolution that we not only celebrate but support tonight. It is just a delight to know that we are going to be recognizing a man who 50 years ago stood in that great hall and received the Nobel Prize, and tonight we're going to ask him to stand in this great hall as we recognize and support our dear friend, Dr. James Watson. Jim, I know the hall will be a little more fancy in Stockholm next week, and the applause might be a little bit louder, but I guarantee you it could not be more sincere than from each of us here. And as a tribute to Dr. Watson, the Grammy award-winning violinist, his friend Joshua Bell, is with us tonight, and Joshua's going to be performing for us. He is to music what you scientists are to genetics, with over 40 CDs and movie soundtrack recordings behind him, as well as appearances literally around the world, including one very interesting one in Washington, wasn't it, when you played in the subway? Yeah, so I mean, the man, he's everywhere. This was after he was a big star. This was not how Joshua got started. Joshua has earned and truly deserves the rare title of classical music superstar. He'll be accompanied on the piano by Frederick Chu, who, along with being a friend of Cold Spring Harbor Labs, is also an accomplished concert pianist and a wonderful recording artist in his own right. Ladies and gentlemen, to honor our dear friend Dr. James Watson, please join me in welcoming Joshua Bell and Frederick Chu, who play for us.
Thank you so much. We're going to start with a very small piece by George Gershwin. Thank you. That was the Prelude by George Gershwin, originally written just for piano, but I stole it for violin, actually arranged by Jascha Heifetz, the great violinist. We're just here to play for you for about 5 or 6 minutes, so we have one other piece to play. But I just want to say how nice it is for us to be here. This is our second time at this event. I feel so lucky to have met Dr. Watson several years ago and to have spent a little bit of time with him. It's one of my just great privileges I've had. And Frederick and I are, like most musicians, we're science buffs, and we jump at any chance to be in a room with brilliant people. And I actually performed 2 years ago at the Nobel Prize ceremony, so I got to be there for that. And now here again to be here with the honorees and Dr. Watson. It's just thank you so much. We've got yes, thank you. Just one more piece. It's a little longer than that last one. It's by the sort of rock star violinist of the 19th century, Pablo de Sarasate, and it's called Zigeunerweisen, which means gypsy airs. Thank you.
Mark Lipschutz is a board member of the Michael J. Fox Foundation. He's the head of energy and infrastructure at Kohlberg Kravitz Roberts, and prior to joining KKR, he was with Goldman Sachs. He's always been really involved in a number of charitable organizations, but when he heard about the mission of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, it was clear where his heart was. Mark is a board member, trustee of the Bard College for Tutorial Studies. He is a board member of the American Enterprise Institute. There you are. He is very involved at Mount Sinai Medical Center and a real force over at the 92nd Street Y. But we are very happy to have him take the podium to introduce our first honoree, Mark Lipschutz.
Thank you, Deborah. One of America's most beloved and respected actors, Michael J. Fox was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1991. An avid activist for Parkinson's research, he formed the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which since that time has invested over $300 million in research aimed at finding a cure for this terrible disease. I joined the board of the Fox Foundation in 2009, and so I've had the pleasure of working closely with Michael over the years. He is tireless in his efforts and always upbeat. And despite the challenges he has faced, he has thrived both on screen and off screen, and in fact has a new television series premiering on NBC this coming fall. It is my distinct pleasure and privilege to be here tonight to be able to present the honor of the double Helix medal to Michael. Let me please turn to the video first.
Wake up and my feet are cramped and I'm symptomatic and I have a hard time brushing my teeth. If I have a morning like that, then I just know it's going to be a challenging day, but it doesn't, I just reset for that. And I don't write off the day ahead of time because of that.
I think the word that most comes to mind when I think about Michael J. Fox is optimism.
He's the kind of person who's not afraid of trying something new, something completely novel to attack Parkinson's disease.
The Michael J. Fox Foundation's mission is exclusively focused on finding a pathway to a cure for Parkinson's disease.
Parkinson's disease is the progressive neurological disease which causes tremors and difficulties in movement. And this is caused by loss of neurons in certain part of the brain.
At the time I exhibited symptoms, a tiny symptom, my pinky twitching. Somewhere near 80% of my dopamine-producing cells are already gone. So we have no way to identify the disease before symptoms appear.
Before Michael was diagnosed and started the foundation, Parkinson's research was a group of scientists who were very interested in this disease scattered around the world who were working on it rather disconnected. The Michael J. Fox Foundation brought all those scientists together, attracted a lot of new scientists into the field, and then really expanded what type of research is going on and also expanded that into the clinic.
The Michael J. Fox Foundation has, over the course of its life, starting in the year 2000, has actually invested over $300 million in translating, again, science into cures.
I want people to wake up in the morning and say, who's working on my problem today, and know that we are.
The establishment of Michael J. Fox Foundation boosted the funding for Parkinson's disease, which can be used in more flexible manner compared to funding agencies such as NIH.
So patients and people who are personally committed to the success of the Michael J. Fox Foundation play an enormously important role in the foundation. And Team Fox has been a tremendous part of the success of the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Team Fox has a presence now in 26 countries, all 50 states, and this is a grassroots effort. These are people who in their own communities are putting together a golf tournament, who are running the marathon in support of Michael J. Fox. And it has raised over $16 million. And I look at great organizations like Cold Spring Harbor. Here's the future I see. I see a future where we have cured Parkinson's disease. Now, I don't know how long that's going to take, but I know that the foundation and those of us involved with it are going to stay completely committed and focused to finding that cure until that day comes.
He's simply an inspiring guy. He really reminded me that it is completely okay to try something drastically different if we believe that we can help the rest of the world. So he's the kind of person who I want to spend every effort to help.
When the world looks back and is watching Back to the Future long after flying cars are a reality, Michael will still be remembered as that optimistic person, that advocate for patients' rights, that friend, that father, that husband that everyone looks up to.
At first glance was about a loss. As I really kind of learned to sit with it and look at it, the hole that was created started to fill in with all this amazing stuff. It's just been a tremendous journey that I wouldn't have embarked on otherwise.
Michael, if you could please join us on the stage.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, I'm going to go off my comments for a second and just say Mark is on a board level an example of why we've had such success and have been able to do the work we've done. The board support that we have and the tremendous board that we are lucky enough to have attracted and hung on to has just been instrumental in anything we've been able to do, and Mark is emblematic of that. I want to thank Freddie and Erwin Stoller and all of tonight's dinner chairmen for the honor of this award. I'd also like to thank Kim, Carrie, Maricela, Jan, and Martin Stoller for being here tonight, and my wife Tracy, her mother Corky Pollen, and sisters Dana and Lori. That's my family. I'm humbled to be in the company of Art and Mary and all those who have received this award before us. When Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA in 1953, they immediately understood that they had made an amazing contribution to the study of life and its systems. Nearly 60 years later, their contribution continues to reverberate in the pursuit of medical breakthroughs. Parkinson's is one of the best examples. When we started our foundation 12 years ago, the prevailing wisdom was that genetics didn't play a role in the disease. Today, that thinking has been turned on its head. The field has been re-energized by the discovery of genetic targets that play a part in some of the most promising PD drug development we've seen in decades, if not ever. In Parkinson's and other diseases of the brain, we're closer than ever to the cures patients need. Thank you for supporting research that can impact countless lives. Thank you again for the honor of this award, and enjoy the evening.
Wow. Michael, congratulations. It's fantastic. Now I'd just like to invite everybody to enjoy your dessert. We're going to be back with more, and Bob Hardwick and his wonderful team is going to be giving us a little mute music. More great honorees and more wonderful, inspiring speeches to come. As we heard a couple of moments ago, it was 50 years ago that a gentleman that we all hold in such high esteem was honored with the world's premier prize for his scientific discovery. A man whose co-discovery of the structure of DNA back in 1953 was the first chapter in an incredible world that continues to expand and bring new horizons every day. Jim Watson could have rested on his laurels with that one discovery, but that, of course, would not be at all what this man is all about. 2 decades ago, he played a key role in the launch of the Human Genome Project, ushering a new era of molecular targeted therapies. It was at one of these dinners when we learned that he and Craig Ventnor, the first 2 humans to be sequenced, shared some interesting details about what their DNA indicated. And I will not share that with you, but Jim, feel free. But it's really amazing to be in the presence of a man who has continued to give his life to the service of humans in the discoveries of the scientific realm. His brilliance, his vision, and his empathy make him truly a superstar among stars. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. James Watson.
When Mary Lindsay gets involved as a philanthropist, she gets to the heart of the institution and its people. Early training as a nurse gave her lifelong passion for improving health for families throughout the world. When I met Mary when I was a young scientist visiting Cold Spring Harbor for a summer meeting. It was the symposium of 1967. She had a big dog, and also a very pretty French girl was walking with her. So soon after, I was at her house. Why, you can guess. We learned a lot from Mary over the decades. We learned to appreciate how eager people are for scientists to find cures. It's also, I've now been wanting to cure cancer for 65 years. So a long time, and I intend to win. So Mary inspires us to work hard. She's introduced me to countless, these pages, I apologize. Benefactors, befriended and supported young scientists, and really very important, established a much-needed child care center and has served on the board for half a century. I should say that before Mary came, I had raised money for a squash court. Okay. The money went to the child care center. So if any of you wish to give us a squash court, we need one. Okay. Mary championed the Lindsay family legacy at Cold Spring Harbor, and her nephew Bob is now vice chairman of the board. In addition to Cold Spring Harbor, Mary has dedicated herself to many other causes, including the Columbia School of Nursing and Planned Parenthood. Mary will be forever an indelible part of Cold Spring Harbor's DNA. So Mary is a great personal inspiration for me. I mean, she's still a warm and intelligent human being, and she's over 90. So that's my ambition. Thank you.
Ever since I can remember, I've had to be involved in some kind of movement or something that is for social change. It's been a passion for me.
Mary is, always someone who expects the world to get better. And not because of the work of others, but she wants to be part of it.
She doesn't take on and support any old thing that rolls along. I mean, she's very conscious and conscientious about putting her time and energy to things that really matter.
Planned Parenthood of Suffolk County was my first introduction to Mary, and because she was a nurse, she brought a special sensitivity to hearing the voices of women and wanting to understand their needs and the needs of their children and their families. In 1997, when I was working in Vietnam, Mary came to visit the maternal and child health care centers that Pathfinder was supporting.
We went to their clinics, we talked with the people that were working in the field, we talked with the women who were looking for the services. It was one of the most edifying things I ever did.
Mary came off that plane, and I don't know if she ever slept for the 10 days that she was there.
I think we set standards for women that had never been there before, and opportunities for women that had never been there before.
Whether it's family planning or research, Mary's after the high fruit on the tree to solve some of the world's inexcusable and intractable problems.
I've been interested in health and health care, and the idea of doing scientific research to discover causes of diseases had always fascinated me. And so the lab was a natural thing for me to be interested in. My own daughter had lung cancer, and it was a heartbreak. By the time she died, I was convinced that somebody had to find a cure for lung cancer.
We hope in the future to be able to identify specific mutation in each lung cancer for each patient, and to be able to link these to a particular type of treatment. And hopefully these will lead to improve survival for the patient.
Your big cancer centers are commendable and raising funds and probably doing a great deal, but they're not coming from the very root of the evil.
When science pivots in one direction or another, Cold Spring Harbor is right there, leading the change in direction.
I think it's one of my goals is to see better treatment and better prevention. Yes, why else? What else would you be doing all this for?
She is a humanitarian, but she's a humanitarian starting at home with what she does every day when she wakes up. It's not a grandiose, abstract theme, it's who she is.
The number of people that have appreciated and gained from her wisdom, her experience, and her judgment. There are going to be many parts of Mary out there, always.
So Mary is our grande dame. In 90, hip replacement, she's not stopping.
Congratulations. Take a photo.
I love saying that Jim is a young man because I still think of Jim as a very young man. And I'm delighted to be able to say thank you to you and to Bruce and to the lab for this evening. I first met Jim when he was walking around the lab because there was a time when we were investigating tumor viruses. And then I think the lab just took a giant step and moved forward into cancer and into neuroscience and the brain. And I have had the pleasure of being on the board as these transitions have taken place. And it's been a thrill, I've got to tell you. It's a wonderful ride to be on the Cold Spring Harbor Lab board. And so I want to thank everybody at the lab And I was given a chance to play just a very tiny role in solving some of the secrets of science. And these secrets of science are the things that are making up our genetic lives and are changing our lives constantly. And I feel that being a part of the lab is a part of one of the great changes of our time. To you, Jim and Liz, and to Bruce and Grace, and Bruce and Grace, especially Bruce, for your wonderful leadership. I thank you and all my good friends at the laboratory. I want to thank you all for including me and for this memorable honor. I take it I'm going to cherish it, and it's a wonderful thing for me in my ancient old age. Thank you. Where are you, Steve?
Right here.
I'll go over all right.
Great job, Mom. You hit it out of the ballpark.
Wow. Well, you can prominently display it.
Now we got to get down these stairs. We can do it.
What a tough act to follow. Mrs. Lindsay spoke about what a joy it is to have played a small role in unlocking the secrets of science. And our next presenter, as well as our next honoree, know a little bit about what that joy must be like, because they have gotten to feel that experience virtually every day as scientists. It's my treat to introduce to you now Herb Boyer. Now, he has been up here before. Herb was presented the Double Helix Medal in 2009. Mr. Boyer is one of the early pioneers in biotech revolution. He founded Genentech back in 1972. And if you think back to the 1970s, that was an absolutely ridiculously revolutionary, radical idea, the idea that you would start a company that would do something called genetic engineering to create a whole new generation of medicines that no one had ever really thought about before. Well, boy, oh boy, talk about being a visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Dr. Herb Boyer.
Thank you, Deborah, for that nice introduction. Now, it's my turn to make an introduction. I first met Art Levinson over 30 years ago when he was a young postdoctoral fellow at the University of California with Harold Varmus and Mike Bishop. It was right down the hall from my laboratory. In 1980, Art finished his postdoctoral tenure with Mike and Harold. But at that time, his wife was still a master's student at the University of California in Berkeley. So Art had to find something to do for a year. So because of the few young talented scientists we had at Genentech at the time, Art decided to spend a year at Genentech doing science and waiting for his wife to get his degree. So during that year, that interim year at Genentech, Art decided to postpone an academic career, much to the consternation of his mentors, who thought he was wasting a chance to make a name for himself in academia, which he probably would have if he had taken that path. During Art's tenure at Genentech in the early years, he made many scientific contributions to biotechnology and science, and he was responsible, a lot of people know this, but he was responsible for developing the technology that led to large-scale production of proteins for clinical use, taking a laboratory procedure which would make a few milligrams of protein to making thousands and thousands of metric tons of pure protein for clinical applications. Art proceeded through his early tenure at Genentech to become, in 1993, the Senior Vice President for Research and Development. In 1995, Genentech happened to find itself to be in a position in which we had no CEO. And there was a week of panic when we were trying to search for a new CEO, and it took about that long, 1 week, to identify Art as our new CEO. And I remember asking Art if he would like to be CEO of Genentech, and he said, give me 24 hours, and I'll think it over and let you know. In 24 hours, he came back, and he said yes. That was a momentous event for Genentech and the world. The board had for some years recognized Art's talents, and we knew that he would make a premier CEO for Genentech. One of the paramount characteristics of Art, which we knew was very critical, and it's critical for any CEO, to have integrity. And Art was the epitome of integrity, and everyone at the company knew it, and that, I think, in part was why he was accepted and did such a great job over the years. Art assembled a renowned management team that propelled Genentech to global recognition as a premier biotechnology company. Under Art's leadership, a new paradigm for treating cancer was developed that resulted in effective treatments for, among others, breast and colon cancer. In 2008, Genentech reached a position with his partner Roche, and Roche bought Genentech for $48 billion. Art's leadership in the emergence of Genentech to a premier biotechnology company is recognized not only by the Genentech family, but also by numerous awards and accolades. Institutional investors named him America's best CEO in the biotech sector 4 years in a row. For many years, Genentech, under Art's leadership, was recognized as the #1 company in the United States. Barron's recognized Art as one of the world's most respected CEOs. At Genentech, we always knew he was #1. Today, Art is a member of the Roche board and serves as chairman of Apple's board of directors. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Arthur D. Levinson.
I would describe Art as brilliant, quirky,
intense, extremely ethical.
Art is original. He's creative.
Very analytical mind that comes across really quickly.
I started at Genentech in 1980. I worked as a scientist for about 12 years.
Art and his colleagues, the first 8 or 9 of the scientists at Genentech, just blew open science.
He was a hardcore nerd scientist.
Whenever he wanted to be, he could be the best scientist in the room.
And then I slowly got enticed into management roles. I became head of research in 1990, head of R&D in 1992, and CEO in 1995.
We were always sure in every situation with any company that we ever dealt with that our CEO was smarter than theirs. And for us, that was a source of real pride.
Art ran Genentech by saying, if we do what's best for patients, we will do the right thing and we will do what's right for the business.
He figured out of all that research and science and possible projects, which were the ones that would make a difference.
Well, some of the drugs that we're all proud of during that time was the approval of Rituxan, Herceptin for breast cancer, Avastin for a variety of solid cancers, Lucentis for macular degeneration, Tarceva for a couple of different kinds of cancers.
So I am a cancer survivor and a cancer researcher. When I was diagnosed with cancer, there were no targeted drugs available for me, and I took the conventional chemotherapies, which were really toxic to my whole body. This is in total contrast to targeted therapies, which is specifically designed to target the cancer cells, and so they have like a smart bomb effect.
Herceptin was a particularly important approval for us. It represented the very first kind of personalized medicine, meaning that the drug was shown to work really quite well in women with breast cancer that had a particular driver mutation.
Treatment with Herceptin, the antibody against HER2/neu, saves the lives of 50% of the women who have HER2/neu positive breast cancers.
Herceptin is a game-changing drug that, 14 years after its launch is still an unchallenged and unqualified success for women.
Cancer research is really trying now to focus on getting much better early detection methods, much more effective drug delivery methods, and we're trying to develop less toxic and more targeted therapies, such as those being produced by Genentech.
I think targeted therapy for cancer is clearly here to stay. I think we've had many successes in the last 15 years in this direction, and we can expect many more.
Personalized medicine was pioneered in cancer treatment, and there's little doubt that Genentech led that revolution. Art was part of that, an important part of that.
Art really was our shining star. He really was the best of the best at Genentech.
Legacy may be the drugs that Genentech developed, but I think it's kind of the whole package from my view, from scientist to leader to drug developer.
Well, first of all, Herb, thank you very, very much for the exceptionally gracious comments. It's a truly special honor to receive this award from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, actually for more reasons than might apply to most. My entire scientific career growing up, Cold Spring Harbor represented the epitome of the greatest place to do science, biology, and genetics under the always outstanding leadership of Jim Watson and Bruce Stillman. It was always a dream of mine to work there and get a job offer, and I actually did, as was mentioned, and though my wife was finishing up a graduate school at Berkeley, once I got that job offer, I thought, wow, maybe 3,000 miles isn't so bad for a little while. But what happened, a fluke, as many things are in life, I was scheduled to go back for my kind of final round before I was going to decide to take the position there. It was in March of 1980, and there was a freak March snowstorm, and all the airports in New York City were closed. Also, my wife, even though she was in school and working only part-time, was making twice as much money as I was as a scientist, and it wasn't entirely clear how we would make up that gap. So I turned the offer down, often thought about it, but clearly if I had accepted I would have been thrilled, and often wonder what would have happened in that universe. So it was my very good fortune to come to San Francisco, as mentioned, for my postdoc with Mike Bishop and Harold Varmus, and I got to know there Herb Boyer. Herb started Genentech, it was actually in 1976, and it's been correctly stated many times that Herb didn't simply start a company, he started an industry. And it's been a wonderful industry. And he started it with a few what looked like simple principles, but at the time were not only unusual, they were actually unique. Nobody followed these principles. And it was the idea that he would hire absolutely the best young scientists out there, whatever that took, give them a large amount of independence, rather than the big pharma model where
the scientists tended to disappear quickly once they went to work at a big pharma company, he encouraged his scientists to not only publish, but publish without his particular name on the paper so they could get their own recognition independent of Herb, and to pursue, very importantly, basic research in areas that, if successful, would lead to the potential for the development of novel and very important drugs. So it wasn't simply the model where we'd kind of scan the literature and see what might make sense and then put a bunch of chemists on it, but it was really to set the stage with the foundation of the basic research. Nobody had done that before, and even to this day, very few people follow those particularly very successful principles. If Herb provided the foundation of those operating principles for the company, the fuel for that success came from Dave Goodell. Dave was a scientific force of nature at the company, the first scientist hired by Herb and Genentech. And we all knew that he was so good and so dedicated and committed, and often sleeping on the cot overnight to get that last experiment done, that with him at the scientific helm of the company, despite all the challenges and the difficulties of that new technology, that somehow we would all be okay. And we were all okay. Over the 30 years, Genentech continued its leadership, became the most valuable biotech company in the world, but more importantly, developed all kinds of drugs in many different therapeutic areas that benefited patients in many different areas immensely, became the leading source of oncology drugs in the world, and in the process saving, as Bob Cohn mentioned correctly, and Arnie, countless lives of people with suffering from cancer. So I fully realize I didn't get here alone, and there's just a few other folks I want to mention that have been very influential in my professional and other life. Arnie Levine was my thesis advisor at Princeton as a graduate student. Mike Bishop as my postdoc mentor at UCSF. And Sue Hellman, who helped me co-lead Genentech in those last 8-10 years, did a fantastic job doing that. David Botstein, who I've known, consider a close friend for 30 years, and a close scientific colleague, and all of them have really helped me greatly. And then finally, I need to give a little shout out to my great family. My wife, Rita, I've been married for 30 plus years. My son, Jesse, my daughter, Anya, all fantastically understanding and supportive, and I'm sure more than I've ever deserved. So to all of them and everybody in the room who showed up here tonight, and particularly Cold Spring Harbor Labs, you have my deepest gratitude and appreciation. Thank you very much.
Art, it sounded like you're a little wistful about turning down that offer, and Bruce just told me that it still stands if you need a lab. They've got some space for you down in Cold Spring Harbor. What an amazing night it has been. 3 of the most inspirational people have taken this podium. Ms. Lindsay, God bless you. You inspired young scientists for all the right reasons, and you continue to do so. Michael Fox, your courage, your stamina, your leadership, and your inspiration have touched more than one generation, and you are changing lives because of what you do with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And Art Levinson, the leadership at Genentech, and the incredible list of drugs that were developed during your time there, as you said, have saved countless lives, but it's also given so much hope to people who get the diagnosis that they prayed they wouldn't get, but they got anyway. And thanks to the work at your company, you have made an amazing difference in people's lives. And to every single person in this room, you are supporting an organization that is giving people hope, that is giving people a reason to believe that one day they won't have to worry about some of the things that they might have to worry about. And to you scientists who toil day in, day out, We really hope you've had fun tonight because we are so in awe of what you do every day. And thank you, thank you, thank you. This concludes our 2012 Double Helix. Hope you've had fun and that we'll see you again next year. Congratulations, everybody.